Okay, welcome to another episode of Denusion. I have the supreme pleasure and blessing to be joined with my friend Precious Phiri today. She is the co-founder of Igugu Trust, the African coordinator for Regeneration International, and she's an educator and farmer in the Wange community of Zimbabwe. Precious, your work is stunning. I have long been around it, within the savory community. That's how we originally met and got connected. I believe you worked with the African Center for Holistic Management for a long period of time, but we've always been around each other, and I've just been so fascinated with your work, and I am just so excited to dive into this conversation today and get to spend some time with you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with maybe a little bit on your background. Obviously, you're from Zimbabwe. Maybe you can talk about that, or even the Wenge community, where I believe you were born and raised, and is currently the community in which you work in. So let's just start there and see where the conversation goes.
Oh, that's amazing. And honestly, I'll continuously say thank you. Uh, First of all, for just thinking about me and having me here. And thanks for the kind words as well when you were introducing me. Yeah, it's hard to listen and stand aside when someone introduces you because half the time when you have your head in the soil or in the fields, it's hard to think about yourself or who you are. So it's really nice for you to highlight some of the pieces about my life. I was
Mm.
actually born and raised here in Zimbabwe, rural Zimbabwe. I was raised in the Wange communal lands. I grew up with my beautiful grandmother, who I will consider for the rest of my life as one of the bravest women that I've ever encountered. And she gave me that spirit of the brave. That meaning that life wasn't very easy. We grew up in serious, deep poverty because I was sort of semi orphaned. By semi orphaned, I mean my dad passed away and we had a mom, but then sometimes the dynamics in Africa play out this way. You then get to be raised by a grandmother because, especially if your mom remarries, she cannot bring you and your siblings to her new marriage. Um,
Wow.
Yes, and unfortunately, when that happened, we also incidentally didn't get to know our mom. So by our, it's my sister and I. I didn't get to know my mom until I was about 22.
Wow.
Yes. So basically, growing up with my grandmother, who was getting older and older by the time. So I really got very used to working on the land, working in other people's fields for food, for everyday survival. And we belonged to some sort of religious sect for most people who know most sects in Africa. And this particular one gave out girls to marriage very early. So my grandmother sort of put her foot down. I have no idea what drew her to that kind of mentality. She did not want us to marry young. So basically, in the church, we were two tall girls. Well, because everyone usually got married early, and anyway, I've evolved over the years, and my spirituality took a different path. So obviously, I don't belong there anymore. But so some of my deepest inspirations are really gleaned from the brevity and bravery of my grandmother, who really took the heat and raised us up to know that you can work for yourself and actually continue being human without degrading yourself. So,
Continue being human without degrading yourself. What do you mean
yes.
by that?
Without really selling your body so that you survive, you can use your hands, you can work, you go to people's fields, a few lines of corn farms and millet farms, you do weeding and you work, and they'll give you like a bucket of grain. Then you go and grind it, then you get your meal from that. So that's how
Wow.
we grew up. From as early as 9 years old. That's how far back I remember.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You said this multiple times, but the idea of bravery, the bravery of your
Yeah.
grandmother, um, obviously from the religious and marriage perspective, one example. But she just sounds, I don't know, I wish I could meet her, or I could have met her if she's not
Yeah,
with us anymore.
no, she sleeps now.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things that I saw was, when you're faced with hunger and famine, you would tend to take very drastic measures maybe to survive. But one of the things that I saw her do, she would go without a meal so that we ate. And yeah, so just the culture of working, being kind, being respectful, and being open as well. To me, that was all brave for a woman raising girl kids and still standing her ground. And so when she left, I was about 16. So I headed my family, so that remained, and so that I carried all my life because I started taking care of things at a very young age.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much of your story is shared with most rural Zimbabwe families?
Yeah, so this may be a story from most girls who were left by their parents at an early age, because it's hard to then transition into a new home, especially if your mom remarries.
I
So,
see.
yes.
I
But
see.
some become fortunate because you can go to the city or to the next relative. But we had to stay alone for about 2 years, and I was basically really blessed to be sponsored throughout my whole education because of the circumstances that surrounded our growing up. So that's a bit of a
Yeah.
mouthful, but that's some of the things that have really shaped me, and I'm very grateful to be where I am. To me, life is an absolute miracle, and I couldn't trade it for anything. All the experiences made me who I am.
Hmm. If people are listening to this, they miss my smile that I currently have on my face. Your energy and joy is contagious, and I'm not trying to compliment you. It's very hard for me not to be smiling, especially looking at your smile. So
Thank you.
it's it's encouraging, and I think we need a lot more hope and encouragement today, especially here in the United States, my own context.
Yes,
Um,
thank you, Daniel.
I'm fascinated. Right before we hit this record button, you and I were chatting about the Wange community, and I was just making sure I had my pronunciation right of some of these words, and you made the comment that you were born and raised in this community in the rural I forget what you're calling it, but this rural community in Zimbabwe, but that's currently where you are today as well. I think growing up with your circumstances, my first thought, and maybe it's a very Western American thought, which I'm happy to acknowledge, like we see it as growing out of hardship, and then you move on and you leave. You seem to have stayed, and you're working there and you're healing there in the community and the ecology, which I really want to dive into. Um, but maybe we can just start there. Like what kept you in place? Like why are you still in this community working from the inside out? Like what does that mean to you?
So that's an incredible question, in fact. And the thing though is I've never really thought of being out of here.
That's awesome.
Um, I can't imagine how that looks like. So what happened is after high school, I got another scholarship to actually access a degree level education, and this happened in South Africa. So for some people who may be listening, we also realize that most people, when they get an opportunity to go further abroad, they would really stay there, and not because they don't like it at home, but maybe sometimes you tend to see much more wider a wider spectrum of opportunities to say, oh my goodness, okay, so I've been placed here, so what is in this place for me? How can I connect myself to this place, and then I can visit home while I work and live and thrive and sort of pave a new future, a new life for myself here. So I somehow intuitively, honestly, just got hooked and got interested in finding solutions in agriculture and land management. I grew up along one of the greatest national parks, which is called the Wange National Park. So the interaction with livestock and wildlife and our crop fields and wildlife were that of conflict. And so until there's even a word that is called human and wildlife conflict, which basically is trying to share some light on um, the unsettling truths that exist between us as communities of Wange and the wildlife with which we belonged from ages past to now. So half the time, if it's either there's a drought or an elephant has come into the crop field or a lion has taken a goat from our neighbor, we didn't have livestock, but I could talk towards cropping. Um, and so for some reason, even in schooling, I was always interested, even when I was doing what we call ordinary level, which is Form 4 in this case. I was the only girl who was doing agriculture in class. My other friends were doing food and nutrition and fashion and fabrics. And so I now currently work with one of my teachers who taught me agriculture at high school. He's serving the same communities that I'm serving. So for me, I think my life was always embedded around finding solutions. And when I was at college, I literally just checked myself into the Savory Center. I was like, hey, my degree doesn't really need for me to study or to have an internship, but can I come and be getting things hands on? And when I went there, a whole new level of light bulbs, some things that were sort of contradicting what I was learning in college, but it felt like home and it felt like I had really found something that I could also develop and connect myself to. And that was one of the reasons why I came back, because the work made so much sense. And I came back home where I then got a family and everything. Yeah.
What what about, so you were saying the girls or the individuals, that the family surrounding you were interested in the fashions and the fabrics and the nutrition and the diets. What brought you, down deep into agriculture? Like, what about corn or cows, or this conflict between agriculture and wildlife? Like, what there drew you?
Honestly, to me, what drew me was hunger. I it's one of the things
Wow.
that I dread. Poverty and not being able to feed yourselves. And thinking of my grandmother going without food. And at some point, my young sister had to drop off school because I was the older one, as the one who continued to go to school, because we didn't have food. You would forage for mushrooms and leafy vegetables, but then from the maize meal or sorghum meal or millet meal. So now that I think about it, I may not have thought about it then, but I think it was one of the things that was embedded in my heart and brains, and at the very core of my being, to be fair, to say, I don't think I wish this even for anyone, no matter how bad they were in life. No one should starve and not be able to eat and not be able to have a decent life. So I feel like that's what inspired me, and it still resonates, and I feel like it resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah. What absolutely. What's the connection between agriculture and food and health for communities?
So agriculture, as we have learned, and I'll borrow my mentor's absolutely wonderful man that I also know you look up to, Alan Savory, being the production of food and fiber, right?
Mm.
From the world's lands and oceans and everything. So I'll speak on the savannah um, pieces. So agriculture, basically, to be fair, our land and soil is the essence of our lives. Though over time things have evolved and we all think we can always get millie meal from the stores, from the shops. So millie meal is
Right.
like one of our staple foods. But the idea is, beyond food security, there is what we call food sovereignty. Agriculture, and when it is owned and really governed at communal level, it gives us food and seed sovereignty. We are in control and have a say of what seeds we plant, how we plant them, how we produce this food. Is it culturally appropriate? Is it nourishing to our bodies and to the society and community that we belong to? How do I help my neighbor to also access seeds and food? Do they need my hand for me to go and help them plant, weed, and harvest? So there's a lot of dynamic just beyond packaged food in a box for people to eat. There's a whole community that is embedded around that, and a whole livelihood as well. So it's really beyond money and what money can buy, but it's a lot of bringing people together.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
food and agriculture brings people together. It's
Yes.
it's 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 a good point. Talk to me about sovereignty, if you will. You use that word twice.
Yes.
Um,
So
communal, seeing agriculture in this communal lens with seeds and food and such. What does that have to do with sovereignty?
So it has to do with sovereignty, maybe a bit of background in,
Hmm.
I'm sure, even for most people who are listening, we all know that we are also in the face of very industrious and I'll use the word hectic, hectic forms of farming, for lack of a better word, where every day you experience, and we found this knowledge, right? But the more we find it and the more people actually engage in synthetics, fertilizers, pesticides, the more people drift apart from even working together. So
Wow.
now, instead of coming together to help each other manage weeds and give each other plans on what other mixed crops can we put in to manage like foreign weeds that can disadvantage our crops, you then resort to monocultures, and here are some herbicides and here are pesticides in case your crops are affected, and so that gives people a drift apart. But when we farm using our normal ways that were what kept our civilizations and communities growing and going for the longest of times, we find that we also are brought together by just sharing ideas, sharing seeds. Do you have this seed? I don't have this one. Oh, I traveled last week. I brought this form of seed. So for me, that is
Wow.
sovereignty. And the preservation of the crop and the seed. Despite what other governmental projects are going on around you, you are still
Mm.
able to say, hey, I have a plot of land where I would love to reserve and preserve for the seeds that have sort of defined us as a people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do, do do you know who Wendell Berry is? An American author? Wendell
For
Berry.
no.
He he's one of the early thinkers in like the sustainable agriculture, ecological farming space here in the United States. And he has this essay where he critiques modern agriculture because of its rugged individualism, is what he
Yes.
says.
Yes.
And that sounds to be very similar to what you're saying in the sense that pesticides and hectic farming, which I like so much better than the term industrial agriculture. I'm going to start using that if you don't mind. It pushes people away. It's so interesting to me that this there's this tension, um, or there's a connection, I should say, between control and this industrial approach, right? That as soon as we can control nature and we have the technological ability, either in large scale monocrop corn harvesters, right, or pesticides, whatever example you run with, that this control allows us, or this ability to control the natural world, allows us to separate ourselves from community. That they're inversely proportional. That's really interesting.
Totally. And I think maybe after this you can send me so that I look up the author who wrote about how much individualism
Yeah.
happens. Because over time, land really will respond to show you that you're actually not winning by using all these synthetic introductions into my soil, into
Hmm.
me. That's the soil talking. And it leads to scarcity and then scarcity mindset. And then eventually it really disrupts the fragment and the beautiful weaving of a community. And for us and those, I'm sure most of you who know, Ubuntu is really like now, it's like a new thing.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, we are using the framework of Ubuntu. I'm like, has it ever been a framework? It's like Ubuntu is like breathing. It's
Right.
it's not. But now it's like a fancy word because it's like coming back again. Like, where did it go? And when did we start losing Ubuntu? Because a child was everyone's child. We even have proverbs that say a person who doesn't have okay, let me speak it in my native language and I'll translate.
Please.
Ongelazi inkomo uyaludla uchago. It means even a person without cows, they can still actually enjoy milk. So
Wow.
that's Ubuntu, which was sort of connotated by generosity and abundance thinking. But now, even when you are working with communities, individualism is everywhere and it's in all of us. We are all untangling and detangling ourselves from the effects of industrious farming and probably manipulating parts to have a bumper harvest at any cost. We have proverbs that show that sharing food with a visitor will not necessarily finish your whole granary. They're just passing. So we are at liberty to share. But when you're training now, and I remember one of the sessions, I started talking about, when we were creating what we call a holistic context, for those that are listening and they are not aware of what it is. There's a person who really defined it beautifully for me one time. I can't remember their name. They say it's a vision of values that, and Alan always says, the life that we would rather live or else die, and
Mm.
so in the process of time we started talking about abundance, an abundance mindset. And I literally almost immediately knew that we needed to unpack what abundance thinking is, because abundance can still mean amassing so that I abound as precious instead of my neighbor abounding. So when you unpack it and you translate it in our language, it means both abundance and generosity. So that
Wow.
means even if I abound by myself, if I'm the only one who is thriving, when we go out, the land has been deforested, you find that it's infested and affected by so many other issues in that environment, which is the same thing. So if you abound by yourself, you're not necessarily prospering, because
Wow.
prosperity is community. And you put it so well in your book. It didn't say we belong to a community. We are community.
We
That
are a
just
community.
set in. That just set in well in my spirit, and it just so
Let let's stay here for a second. This is so powerful. Let's stay here. So you're saying in your language, the word for abundance doesn't just mean abundance as a thing, but it means abounding, but also generosity. There's this co-creative communal type understanding of what abundance could mean.
yes,
Wow.
yes.
Could you say the word for us or the phrase that would denote
It's
that?
a phrase. It's a phrase. Ukwanda lokuphana. Ukwanda means abundance. Ukuphana means generosity. So even if you are
Wow.
farming, you abound, but you also are generous with the soil that you are working on,
Wow.
so that it will continuously be generous back to you. Literally, it's it's a continuously giving cycle. And I'm not over romanticizing everything, because we are relearning all these things again.
Mm.
Like what I expressed when I spoke about Ubuntu, that it's certainly a big thing. It's in books and everything. And I'm like, is this how far down we were gone? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it's such a beautiful journey, this one. And it's not easy because the social dynamics are really heavy. And the communities, they still encounter big, big donors, big grants that still have the do good frameworks. We're coming here to save you, we're coming here to do this without, so the social stakes are still very challenging. But I feel like consistency is one of the things that we should have as
Mm.
regenerators.
Wow. Consistency. That's a really
Yeah.
good point. We talk about this a lot here. You know, we joke, my wife and I, we joke that there's two people whenever we meet people in this regenerative space that are from the United States, they fit into one of two categories. They're either daisy planters, so flower planters, or daisy pickers,
Mm-hmm.
right? The daisy planters are individuals who want to, get down and stay in place and feel the pains and the abundance and joys of the place, depending, and they're there, right? And they're ready to work. And the daisy pickers, and we all need pickers, we all need harvesters, but they're there for experiences. They're there to learn more about harvesting this, and then they're gone. And then they're gone. Um, from you, and there's a place for both of these people, I realize, but it seems to me what I'm hearing from you is that there's a really, really open and needed space for people to move in, to be permanent, to work from the inside out, and be almost grafted into the landscape. Like, we all know philosophically that the soil and us aren't separate. We are the soil is us. We come from the soil, we are one, right? That's what we were just talking about.
Right.
But there's almost a regrafting that needs to happen. Like you're saying, you guys are relearning here in the United States. I think there's a regrafting to the land that is totally required to take this next step for
Yeah.
true regeneration of the soil in our community to take place.
True. I think during what you've just said has reminded me during the COVID pandemic. I remember talking to Alan. He said, one thing that we've learned is that we either sink together or swim together as team humanity. So the farmer who's on the land is not better off from the person in the city.
Hmm.
There's a big space for all of us to work together in synergy and function together. And so the daisy planter and the harvester and the pollinators and the rain and the sun,
Everything.
by the way, that are all living beings to me right now because of
Mm.
reading a book. All have this role to play. And for me, it feels like probably during the pandemic, we really reached the tipping point of an awareness that everyone has a role to play. Everyone can grow something. Everyone can, and respectfully should interact with the soil. Even if we're in the concrete jungles in cities, we should have a space to interact and understand the soil. The tragic happening of the pandemic and the stresses that it brought with, especially to my beautiful, lovable city of Victoria Falls, which turned into a ghost town within 2 weeks. And
Wow.
the most important thing at that time was food on the table. And we didn't have the luxury and the comfort of tourists coming in and out of a town and leaving tips, and you bring your kids vegetables from the shops. But everyone got their hands dirty on the soil. And it was a beautiful manifestation of an opportunity and a reality that we've sort of always ignored and avoided, but it presented itself to us. And there were lockdowns. We couldn't necessarily access rural food per se for a while before roads were open for people to travel. So so that was a big teacher for me that everyone has a space in this. And if anything, this herein lies the fundamentals of life. And yeah, I couldn't have said it any other deeper way. I wish I could express it. But that's exactly, we all are going through the same things. We may be at different levels. Like you said, that in America, you're recrafting. We are relearning, we are re embracing, and it's a very messy dance, but I feel like we're making headway.
Let's talk about that headway. And I'll just ask a very open question, and because you're involved with so many things and you're doing so much good work, I'll just let you take it whatever direction you like. But talk to me how either with Igugu Trust or Regeneration International or within the Wange community, what sort of projects are you working on? What's the vision for these projects? What success or hurdles are you experiencing? Just let you take it from there.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And I guess as you had said earlier, on a daily, I work with communities in the communal lands, and I have a beautiful privilege of really taking the lessons from the ground, bringing it to network levels. So as Regeneration International and Igugu Trust, we are really close to Seed and Knowledge Initiatives, which is a Southern African, a sub-regional network. We have country-based networks, and then we have an almost pan-African network, which is called Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. So these are all groups of just African natives who are embracing and, embracing practice, embracing frameworks, also embracing the idea that we should also continue to speak out for the food and the farming and the agricultural practices and regeneration, whether we're using agroecology, permaculture, regeneration, whatever you want to call it, we are all looking for the same thing. In the end, we all want the same thing. We want healthy communities, healthy landscapes, healthy economies, and healthy societies. And also for our voices to be heard, even in policy making spaces. So these are like different levels, as I've said. We work on the ground with traditional leaders and some political leaders to a certain extent. At a national level, now you're drafting policy documents to present to your governors and ministers of environment. And then we have sub-regional groups where we are creating communities of practice where people come to share homestead level regeneration to landscape level regeneration, just continuously connecting these pieces. And here is some of the challenges. Like I said earlier, the landscapes are definitely degraded. And for the longest time, now you run meetings. Some young people, once I ran a meeting, and the young person who was 26 years old had never seen what we call a granary. A granary is where you store your food after harvest. So that means for 26 years, I may not know, maybe let's start from six when she could remember. So for 20 years in that community, there had never been someone who has enough to harvest to actually store for the year. So that
Wow.
means in a rural community, people still buy food, which is one of the big markers of poverty and obviously leads to people buying unhealthy food. And then you have big corporations coming in as NGOs with framed and planned humongous grants that get people going crazy. Like when you come and say, hey, community, we have a grant of $50 million, and everyone goes berserk. Because everyone's like, oh my God, all that money. And it doesn't really get to the community's hands in the end, because, of course, these are big NGOs, they have their own administrative targets, and these projects are not really, I tend to find, they 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 are well planned, and these people mean well, like we always say. But half the time we miss out on the nuances of how to bring the communities together. How does this look like when we have left this community? And I feel like some of the movements that are happening in Africa right now, be it through AFSA, like that I spoke about, or Seed and Knowledge Initiative, or my friends who are also small organizations, they call the Soft Food Alliance. You have all these little small groups of people that are doing small efforts, but eventually, if you imagined that by place, it would make a resounding and beautiful weaving of work that's happening. Yeah. So, and there's obviously sometimes big governmental projects that sort of encourage synthetics and pesticides and herbicides, all and everyone meaning very well, but the soil tends to respond with what we call in holistic management unintended consequences. And we continuously have to keep learning and embracing that. Yeah.
Wow. I I think there's so much rhetoric today, at least over here in the United States, where we're looking for big solutions with big impacts, with big changes via a singular channel, whatever that channel may be. I'm getting the opposite from you, right? We're seeing a weaving of small alliances and communities working, more grassroots, not top down approaches. Um, I don't know. Talk to me about that. Like, if we are to build a more beautiful world, do you think, in part, and of course, even there's a weaving of big change and small change that needs to happen. But where should people look to start? I guess that's really what I want to ask.
Yeah, thanks. And I think everyone should look right where they're standing.
I love that.
Yeah, like look right where you're standing. What made your place to thrive? Even if you looked 20 years back, you have the elders, you have information, and what sort of technologies did they used to use? I mean, native things that they used, and how does that look like now where we are? And if each place dug deep into the essence of what identified them as a people. Um, I love sharing some of the examples from just our communities. By birth, I am Precious Dube, right? And Dube is a zebra. So when you want me to do anything for you, just sing the praises that identify a zebra. So that means the zebra and I are related. And when I see a zebra, I see me.
Mm,
A person who has a totem of a buffalo, so our forefathers, they obviously coexisted with these animals and they hunted them on foot. So that means the weak and those that wouldn't continuously carry the genes of the land, they'll be hunted on foot. And so if you're caught on foot, I don't think you belonged. Sort of, so that will be the food of the day. And so a person whose surname is a buffalo, they wouldn't eat a buffalo. You see, now you're already regulating. And then there
yeah.
was meat like eland. Eland is an antelope, which apparently is one of the tastiest. I still have never eaten it myself, but it's fatty and the kings and the elders loved it. And so, because they wanted to have people not overhunt and overkill the populations of eland at whatever cost, they put in a sacredness around it. And so now the saying goes, if you're eating eland meat and it doesn't taste nice to you, so whether you expressed it in your heart or in your
In your
mouth or
mouth.
by word of mouth, you would grow a goiter. So who would eat that meat? And only now am I realizing that it was a way of the sacredness around that
Mm,
meat, knowing that it is the most preferred. And human tendencies were still in action then, but the elders had wisdom, right?
mm,
Because the tendency is you would want to eat what you like every day. But the elders will pull in some rocks of wisdom, and you sort of, think twice before you try that meat. So,
right.
and I would say, everyone, look where you are. And to be fair, if we think about politicians do what people like. So when they say that people love this, the multitudes, the consumers, farmers, marketeers, and everybody is speaking this language, they jump on right away, whether they understand or not. They'll understand when they are deep in there. And that's how we can start influencing policy. And I feel like in our movement, we have lots of privileges of people who are well articulated, who can write. I mean, your book, I can't wait for people to get their hands on it. And then there's people who can talk to the policymakers. And then there's us who work with communities on the ground and keep taking stories to regional levels to say, hey guys, this is what we've seen works. These are some of the struggles. How can we be supported? And imagine if we also had regenerative funders that wouldn't necessarily be bogged down to checking lists of, oh, has this been done?
Mm,
Has this been done? But what about if we focused on harvesting outcomes? This behavior, what has it brought? And what are we learning? Like, where should we be moving as this place? So there's no copy and paste. What works in this community may not work in the other one.
mm,
So those are the dynamics. And I feel like that would at least put us on a track of going to some place where we'll be happy.
yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. I love that. The human tendency to over harvest or do something negative, it's always there. But the wisdom of the elders, you said. The wisdom
Always.
of the elders. That's
It's always been there. I mean, like you have a baby. I have a 2 years, 2 year and a half daughter. We always laugh. She wants all the things that you you don't necessarily wanted to eat. It's legal. So you see, tendencies, we're born with some of the things. And
Mm,
the wisdom of the elders have to be at play. And the wisdom
right,
of nature also teaches us.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's room that needs to be placed for that wisdom, though, right? Because
Yes.
I think humans also have the tendency to eradicate such place,
Yes,
which,
yes, yes. No, definitely,
yeah,
definitely, and it's really complex in every sense of the word, and therefore it's hard for you to give me precious. This is what I think will work for you, and
right,
I couldn't even start saying, Daniel, this is what would work for the world,
right,
which has been an unfortunate thing that we've watched, where regardless of where you are, this is the carrying capacity of the place, this is the crop that you should plant, this is, and so unfortunately, that's how we've evolved to be where we are.
yeah. I
Yeah.
when I first wrote Dark Cloud Country, the prospectus is what authors call it. I sent it out to a number of publishers, and all of them wanted Dark Cloud Country, the book, to be prescribable, to be practice based. Now you've read it. I don't know where I would have fit in practices like this. This is how you utilize the relationship of chaos to
Yeah.
regenerate your place. It was impossible. So that's why we ended up self-publishing the book, because publishers all thought to be readable, for the masses, we had to cater to that very human tendency.
And say,
And
one, do this. Two,
exactly,
no.
exactly. And I think they were totally right to believe that the book would sell many thousands more copies if
Mhm.
if you were to cater to those masses. And the very human and unchecked tendency for prescriptions and practice.
Yes. Yes.
I'm still very glad we did what we did, but it's really hopeful, and I think it's emotionally stimulating to believe that leading with hope and joy and community and communal type work is just as effective, especially for policy. Like you were saying, politicians just they follow that the wording of the people. I think is one
Yeah.
way how you said it.
Yeah.
There's hope there. Grassroots can still work even in the
Yes,
technological age.
definitely. And like what you've just said about your book, the way you wrote it, um, the generations to come will read it and it would still resonate.
Mm.
I I I I saw that in your book you actually quoted the one straw revolution. You literally quoted one of my favorite quotes. My favorite quote of how stupid we look when we fix something that we initially made wrong ourselves. When we are done fixing it, we're like, hey, look at me, I've done this.
Yep.
Um, that book, The One Straw Revolution, when you read it now, it was written in the setting of the mountains of Japan.
Right.
But let me tell you, it works because it's talking about the relations,
Hmm.
the essence, and it resonates. And so I see, like you say, why anyone would be like, maybe it would have been better if he really said, if you want to make the most of the sun, if you want to make the most of the rain, if you want to make the most of of
Right.
soil and your neighbors, this is how you would do it. But when you read, it's like you're reading a dance.
Mm.
You're reading a song. You are reading. I can't describe it, but what I know is it's timeless truths of
Mm.
complexities of what we manage. You take that book and put it, superimpose it into a family. The
Mm.
principles and the framework comes out. You put it in the landscape, the same. You put it on your crop fields, the same. On your animals, the same. So it may take time, but where the voices of regeneration are going, it's a few more pieces that need to come together in the regeneration movement, because right now we're still kind of holding our little flags. I'm permaculture, I am agroecology. You guys, you have a weakness here, you guys have a weakness here, but we need that space where we will notice that we are actually saying the same thing, and
Mm.
where the direction of things are going. That book will be one of the most important things to read.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I showed you this, previous to the call starting, but your blurb, I'm sure you've dealt with some things like this where you put your heart and your soul into something and you send it out to people and you're like, "Hey, what do you think?" And it's the most heart-wrenching, very scary process. And
Yes.
so, we received a bunch of, blurbs from people all over the world for Dark Cloud Country, the new book. And yours, I'll never forget. My dad had just had a stroke. I was driving home from the hospital. He was there for a couple of days, and it was late one night. And my wife was driving, and I opened my phone just to kind of distract my mind. And your email came in with the blurb. And I'll never forget. It was a moment in my life that all I can say is I will never forget it, because even today I can't describe really, like, people try to do a podcast with me about the book, and I don't know, just read it. I don't know how to summarize this thing,
Yeah.
but your note of it being, I'll read it, but it says, "A sacred encounter, the kind you keep closed somewhere special in your heart." And you had a lot of other words surrounding that, but that was the thing that stuck out. And I said, you know what, Precious got it. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, she got it. And I am so appreciative of your time in reading the book. I'm so thankful and blessed to spend the time with you today. Um, I think we need a lot. I think we need many more Preciouses all over the world, in their places, in their communities, doing what their communities need, but in honor and in regard to you and your wisdom. I'm not saying it to be nice. I promise. I'm not trying to, just be nice on a podcast. I mean it. I'm really thankful and blessed that we got to share some time together.
I am so thankful, Daniel, and thank you so much for pouring out your heart to the world and for giving me this opportunity to be with you here. And thank you for even writing that email to me to say, "Hey, can you read my book?" My life has changed forever, and like I told you that I have never taken so much time to read a book. It was the craziest thing that I've ever, like, if I flashed my phone to show you how many notes I was taking. So I think people need to know one of the quotes that I'll carry for the rest of my life. I mean, there's lots of them, and but let me just speak about one. When you spoke about chaos, where you said it is not a lack of order, but it is order that is beyond form. So
Hmm.
that slammed me. Like, I was like, that's exactly why we say let's mix crops, because I was in the middle of the growing season. And you get into someone's field, there's just one crop, and one season of very heavy sun, everything is just withered and looking down like
Right.
this. And then you get into a farmer's field that has been mixed immensely. It's chaotic, it's orderly, but it has no form. And that's what
Hmm.
makes it powerful and
Hmm.
beautiful. So I'm really, really thankful for your talents and for being brave to also let it out there. I don't know how you think and how you frame your words. I hope people won't be laughing about this. I was a bit worried about talking to you today. I was like, does this guy talk like how he writes?
No, I don't. Thank goodness.
Us definitely. But no, thankfully, language is very kind and it's really dynamic.
Yes.
Yeah. And I
Yes.
totally enjoyed connecting with you today on this podcast. And I know it's been forever and we were yada yadaing.
Yes.
But I'm really, really grateful. And thank you for grounding me, to be
Hmm.
honest. You really grounded me. Thank you.
Well, I'm blessed by you, and I'm glad it was reciprocal. Thank you again.
Yeah.
It's been a great day. Thank you.
Thanks.